Well, what a crazy week at Darlington that was. I know the Cup Series race had quite the bit of drama at the end. A lot of wrecks, a lot of cautions, a lot of different drivers up front. Really cool, paint schemes, but just crazy DFS weekend. Just a lot of the top plays, racked out, or a lot of the value plays, having trouble too. So just what a crazy week. But hopefully we can start fresh and get a blank slate, for Kansas. I know some of us did much better than others last weekend, but nonetheless, it's behind us. So we are moving on to Kansas this weekend. Like I mentioned in the Truck Series preview video, we have the trucks and Cup running this weekend. No Xfinity. Just going over the preview for this one, then we'll put out our final picks video and upload the spreadsheet on Twitter the morning of the race. But getting into the race preview and initial thoughts. So we're going to a 1.5 mile intermediate oval. Haven't been to one of these in quite some time. But I still think there's a lot of other tracks and some data this year that we can still pull from, in addition to looking at the practice and qualifying, which we've been doing all year long. It's 267 laps, so quite a bit longer than I think the 143 laps, I believe it was, with the Truck Series. So a lot more Dominator points up for grabs as always. So 66.75 for laps led, and then 120.15 points available for fast laps. As far as what are we looking at, how are we trying to figure out, who's a good driver, who isn't, what we would recommend doing is, first and foremost, looking at practice and qualifying from the weekend. Usually seeing cars that have good speed on the short run and the long run, and trying to find, a nice balance in between your lineup. And then also what we've been seeing a lot too is a lot of drivers, especially some of the more difficult tracks, or some of the tracks that have high tire wear. We're seeing a lot of drivers have issues in practice qualifying. If they have an issue, sometimes they forego their qualifying lap because, hey, they need to spend time fixing the car because it's such a quick turnaround from practice and qualifying. Or, hey, maybe they wreck the car and they immediately have to go to the one backup car that potentially their team has and start preparing it. So we've seen that the last handful of weeks of some really just chalky plays that got into trouble in practice and qualifying, started deep in the field. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens again this weekend. And if it does, kind of, who those drivers are and how they kind of potentially might change your lineup construction. But nonetheless, you still want to look at practice and qualifying. In addition to practice and qualifying, some other, data points or references I think you should use is just look at Darlington last weekend, and don't actually just look at the end results, because we know a lot of the good cars, wrecked out. I think, Ross Chastain wrecked out from the lead. Kyle Larson, I don't know if he was first or second at the time, or where he was when his engine blew up, but he was up front. Kyle Busch, who had struggles, he was up front. Like there was a lot of plays who were up front in that race that, if you just looked at, kind of the end results, you'd be like, wow, those were terrible plays. And from a DFS standpoint, like, yeah, I mean, they didn't get the results, so they didn't get you the points that you were looking for. And, maybe that was the reason you didn't end up cashing in that tournament that you played, but at least they showed good speed. It wasn't like a complete whiff, it was kind of things that you can't control. Like you can't predict when a driver is going to wreck, or, have a mechanical failure or anything like that. But to just look at Darlington, I would say look at Dover, 1 week prior to that. And if you want to, the most recent 1.5 mile track that we were at was at Las Vegas as well, which I think is pretty close to kind of Kansas, the track that we're at now. So those are kind of the 4 data points that we're looking at. I'm not really looking at previous track history just because we know how different this car is. So when we get to the actual drivers, all the drivers in blue are drivers that we are kind of initially high on coming into the weekend. And this can change. Like as if you guys watch this preview video and watch our picks video, there's some of these drivers that will stay the same, but once the grid's set, you'll see exactly where we're high, where we're medium, where we're low, and where we just aren't going whatsoever. And you'll see all of our reasonings behind that with the notes. So Kyle Larson, every single week, is the most expensive driver. I kind of talked about this with John Hunter Nemechek a little bit in the Truck Series. Like, he isn't taking over races like we're used to seeing. Like, he still has good speed, but with all these cautions we've been seeing in the Cup Series too, like every time there's a caution, you re-rack the field. And every time you re-rack the field, especially if it's a track that you need tires for, people are coming down pit road, pit stops, it changes out and cycles who potentially the leader might be. You have a restart, changes up the running order. So we're seeing a lot of different drivers get to the front of the field. And when they are getting to the front of the field, normally they're staying up towards it. There's not a ton of movement unless you're further back in the field, and you just obviously have a much faster car than everybody else. So Larson's really expensive. If you are plugging Larson in, you kind of need him to have a little bit more of a dominating type of performance, just because if you slot him in, you're potentially sacrificing maybe, saving that salary and then maybe rostering two of the drivers in the 9K range, for example, instead of like a Kyle Larson and then like a driver in the 7K range or a driver in the 8K range. So we'll see. There's different ways to go. Chase Elliott has just been extremely consistent, just rattling off top 10 finishes left and right. Again, he's not necessarily having those dominating types of performances, although he did get out front at Dover and lead for quite some time. But we also saw some other cars at Dover get into trouble. But he's been really consistent. I mean, he's the points leader. If you look at the standings, like take off all the playoff stuff, but if you just look at actual driver points, like he is far and above everybody else that he's racing with. JGR, Truex, and Hamlin both have been getting extremely unlucky recently, but both of them had good speed. Both of them had really good speed at Dover, and unfortunately, got into trouble at some point during the race. Both of them had pretty good speed at Darlington before, both of them got into trouble later in the race. So maybe these bad finishes keep the ownership down on Truex and Hamlin, just because people are like, hey, I just played these guys 2 weeks in a row. They burned me 2 weeks in a row. Maybe in Hamlin's case, Hamlin's burning people all year long. But to actually watch the race, they have good speed, so it doesn't concern me too much. You can't get unlucky every single weekend. Byron, man, what a crazy finish between him and Logano. I don't necessarily think there's going to be like a payback, Matt Kenseth throwing Logano into the wall type of moment between the two of them. But yeah, it was kind of fun to see from a fan perspective. Love Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain again this week. They were priced right next to each other last week. I think they offer you a lot of value, a lot of upside. I know they were another two drivers. It seemed like all the drivers wrecked out last week. I know there were two drivers who wrecked out last week, but they had good speed, so I'm not afraid to go there again. I'm not really against, anyone really, from like Christopher Bell all the way on up. And we say this week after week with the Cup Series, like there's so much value. There's so many different drivers who could get out front and lead laps, pick up fast laps. So that's what we're really kind of diving into the data this weekend. Look at practice and qualifying, see, which of these cars are looking like better plays than others. And then if we're in between some of them, let's use some of that data from Darlington. Let's use some of that data from Dover. Let's use some of that data from Las Vegas and narrow our pool, even more than that. But what we've been doing is just kind of finding your core drivers, whether it's a core 2, core 3, core 4, and then just kind of mix and match around there to get to the different plays that you like. Kevin Harvick has been really consistent too. He's much cheaper than Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott has a much higher percentage of running fast laps and leading you, having laps led, but Harvick's been consistent too. I mean, he's been consistently kind of running, 12th to 8th, kind of getting the top 10 finish. So I like that price point. Christopher Bell, potentially, pretty cheap for a JGR car. He showed flashes of speed last week. He never was really able to kind of get that extra like oomph and get him really into kind of dominator range, but he was up there. So depending on where he starts, he might be an interesting driver to slot in Eric Jones, he's been showing the speed, and this is a track that he's historically runs better at. But, again, I'm not really looking too much into that just because it's a different car, different equipment. It's a new year and you can't really rely on that too much. Man, it's 23XI just taking a beating these last couple of weeks. I don't even know if they have any cars left. Seems like both Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace have been getting into each other, and both of them just wrecking out and having issues. So if you're a crew guy over there, or one of the people that has to repair the cars, it has been some long couple of hours, long couple of days, long couple of weeks over 23XI with all the cars that they're wrecking out. But they actually showed decent speed at Darlington before, both of them got into trouble at the end. So, unless practice and qualifying says otherwise, I'm kind of interested in both the price points there. Same as Stenhouse, he's been turning it around a little bit compared to the piss poor season that he started with. And they getting down to the value range. Justin Haley really lucked out and got, I think, third or fourth place finish. I forget where it was, but finished top 5 at Darlington, which was crazy. He all the place differential points that he got you in the finish pinning points too. So he was a slam dunk play if you played him last week. And then Michael McDowell's been running pretty well recently. I know he was able to take advantage of a lot of drivers' misfortune, but you could say that really about anybody in the field. Like, everyone was able to slot up an extra 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, heck, even Cody Ware finished 20th or 19th or whatever it was. It just goes to show you like how crazy of a race Darlington was. So I don't think there's going to be as many cautions this weekend. I think it should run a little, more green than last weekend, but still with this car, with the tire, there's a lot of unknowns. And I think, just looking at the season as a whole, the caution numbers are up. So just keep that in mind. Pit road's really important if your crew is able to gain you a couple of extra spots. So as far as like lineup construction goes, pricing's pretty soft. I'm probably going to want to get, probably 4 drivers in my line from, probably Christopher Bell on up, probably trying to get a mix of 4 of those drivers, and then maybe 3, depending on how low you really want to go, and then just hitting, 2 or 3 plays in kind of the 6K and the 5K range, or, getting 3 drivers in the 10, 9K and 8K range, maybe seeing if there's a value play in the 7K range, and then, jumping down to the pump plays. But we'll see. Like I said, they're coming into the week. I don't know if there's going to be a chalk play. Usually with practice and qualifying and people not qualifying or having bad qualifying runs, like the slate will get kind of chalky. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I hope we have a pretty, relative straightforward, normal, type of DFS weekend, but we'll talk about it. So that's going to do it for the preview video. The truck preview video is up right now too, but we will put out 2 more videos this weekend, and then that'll be it. So thanks, guys.